There are 7 inmates on death row in a secret prison, and I've been tasked with eating their sins. Lust can be a suffocating, sickening experience. Sin Eater, a person who consumes a ritual meal in order to spiritually take on the sins of a deceased person. If only it were that simple. My name is Eleanor Lockwood, but you can call me Nell. I wouldn't call sin eating my job or anything superfluous like that. It simply is my reason for being. My grandmother, Ethel Lockwood, was one of the last in Wales to keep the practice going. With no mother or father to speak of and no desire for children of my own, responsibility fell to me, the unlikely descendant, to take up the mantle and keep it going. I will be the last, that much is certain. People have lost touch with that aspect of the world. The traditions of days gone by, respect for the old ways, and the rituals small towns and villages would undertake to safeguard their communities from wayward souls, unseen terrors, and creatures of the night. When Effa met my grandmother, Ajani, an immigrant from Jamaica, he brought with him stories of voodoo curses known as Obeah, traditions held for centuries, and the importance of respecting one's kin through practice. But the world was changing, and when I came of age, I knew I'd need to see the wider world to bring our family talents to prominence. That's when I stumbled across Sturgeon, a town with a bar between places that caters to those in need. A town with a hotel sporting physical impossibilities on every floor. A town where the dead are ferried across on seaplanes and monsters meet martial artists in Tournament of Nightmares. But what I have to tell you all today goes far, far away from that, to the outer reaches of Sturgeon's eyes, and finds itself situated in a maximum security prison in the middle of the most dangerous location on Earth, the Bermuda Triangle. I am the last Sin Eater, and this is my story.
Miss Lockwood, Mr. McGraw, your presence is urgently requested to deal with the final request of our death row inmates. More information will be provided upon your acceptance, and arrangements will be made to bring you here within 48 hours. Simply dial the number attached, and we will organize the rest. I look forward to hearing from you. Yours faithfully, Warden Leichenberg.
Buck kicked back in his recliner and swirled his whiskey around lazily as I finished reading, smirking from underneath his Stetson.
You gonna go? Hell, why am I even asking? Of course you are.
He downed it in one and slammed the drink down as he gasped, standing up to his full height and cracking his back. He was a burly man in his early 30s, ripped muscles and a thick black beard hiding a chiseled brown jaw and piercing green eyes. Buck was as tough as they came, but calmer and more patient than most men thrice his age. He never judged, never tried to speak for me or tell me what to do. He respected me as an equal, and I admired him all the more for it. Wonder what the hell kind of prison situates itself in the heart of a place like that? How do you even get in there without it being a crash and burn scenario? I pondered aloud, taking note of the number and walking over to the landline in our office. We'd been operating as business partners for a couple of years, taking on odd jobs involving unusual specimens and occurrences that nobody else wanted. Buck called us nightmare detectives. I called us scholars who got underpaid for our troubles.
Makes sense to me, especially if the rumors of this place are true.
Buck played with his beard and rifled through a book he picked from the large shelf on the back.
Tempesta's Penitentiary is spoken of only in passing by scholars as a place that the most problematic individuals in history's shadows would be housed. Not your serial killers or political murderers, but the monsters that history tries its best to scrub from the pages. If we go, it's going to be a rough ride.
He snaps the book shut and grinned at me, my heart skipping a beat.
Sounds like a hell of a hunt. I'm in.
One furtive phone call later, and we were packed for instructions to meet the porter at the airport.
Caracosa Airways. You're sure about that, right?
Buck asked me, face buried in a notebook he'd been poring over in the weeks leading up to our letter from the warden. Said it was his greatest scholarly project, but never showed me a damn thing from it. Yep, they said a guy with a raven will greet us. Kinda hard to miss in Sturgeon, right? Even walking around with an Indiana Jones impersonator like you. I chuckled, punching him in the arm playfully, my other hand running through a playlist on my iPod. Could never relax on a trip without some good music.
Speak for yourself. You dress and act like you're trying your damnedest to be the next Van Helsing, albeit Welsh and female.
And better hair. I dramatically brushed a lock aside as we both laughed. The anxiety of a sea of people rushing past us ebbing away. Out of the crowd came a tall man, sporting an all-black attire, and an overexcited raven on his shoulder, preening his hair and shouting,
Brain food!
as he tried and failed to coax him.
Damn it, Edgar! I told you to cool it!
He hissed, offering up a finger for the corvid as a warning, instead making him tilt his head quizzically before nipping him and shrieking in delight. It's raw! It's raw! He chirped as the man came closer, pinching his brow.
You guys must be Lockwood and McGraw. Could spot you two a mile away. Welcome to Caracosa Airways. I'm Nestor Holden, and this little delight is Edgar. We'll be your guides to Tempestra Prison. You got everything you need. We won't be making any stops on the way, and I've been instructed to assist in any way I can when we arrive, which is a pretty good excuse to get some R&R for us.
Raw and rowdy, Edgar screeched as Nestor clicked in front of him.
What did we say about crass behavior in public?
He hissed.
Only when funny.
Edgar replied solemnly, his head lowered. Myself and Buck chuckling as we grabbed our bags.
Oh, and by the way, I've been told to give you this before takeoff. Keep it on you at all times. It's a charm to help ward off negative aura or something. My boss, LD, said it was imperative to get it to you.
He passed us each a totem. They were Odin hand cards, both sporting frail individuals with their bony hands holding a thick hood in a perpetual state between up and down. Unable to tell if they were raising or lowering it, but the eyes were obscured. It's unsettled me, but I kept it in my pocket, as did Buck, and we departed. For a split second, as we passed through the terminal, I spotted something in my peripheral vision. A thin, gangly sort of creature peering from behind a thin concrete beam that jutted out of the floor. Bioluminescent, black little eyes fixated on me, and drool running down its elongated lips, curled into a smile as gnarled fingers awkwardly crunched until it was holding up a number in my direction. A number that would become synonymous with the rest of my life from that day forward. The number 8. The ride-in was interesting, to say the least. Our pilot was in a perpetual state of drunkenness, spouting off Lord Alfred Tennyson as he took us through rocky shores and across foreboding blackened skies. I had my music on, and I'll be damned if it wasn't atmospheric when the opening riff kicked in. As I looked out of the window, Buck snoring something fierce next to me, my jaw fell slack at the sight that greeted me. Where the ocean had been calm and the wind even more so for the duration of our journey, we were now greeted with a storm of tumultuous proportions. Sharp winds sliced at the window, whipping the ocean into a frenzy, slamming swaves of frothy green liquid at the plane with malice, trying in vain to stop us from approaching.
The wrinkled sea beneath him crawls, he watches from his mountain walls, and like the thunderbolts, he falls, he falls.
The pilot sang over the intercom as he took the plane into a nosedive, sending Bugs, still snoring, head forward with a snap. Edgar crying out as we descended further. My hands clasped to the side of the seat, and my stomach firmly in my boots.
No survivors! No survivors! Edgar! Don't mind him. We're fine. The approach is normal for a place like this.
Nestor kept his arms crossed, seated opposite me in the flight attendant's area, eyes cast outside as bright lights began filling the windows.
Take a look. It's your new home for the next week.
Buck roused from his sleep just in time to catch a glimpse of the imposing structure waiting for us as the plane leveled out and we were on approach for landing. A circular structure spanning several thousand feet rising out of the sea with torrents of water spilling off of the top of the oval base and back into the ocean. Several landing pads visible as lights guided us in. At the center of the structure was a thick steel tube that extended down into the deeps. All around the prison were heavy winds, crashing waves, and darkness for miles on end. If someone wanted to escape, they'd find no respite upon getting out. We were waved down by a sea of guards, and a tall, imposing man stood in the back. Black trench coat and a patterned umbrella sporting blue cherry blossoms. He waved dramatically as we stepped off the plane, and a leather-gloved hand clasped my own with extreme enthusiasm.
Welcome him to my own personal fortress. Do you like the location?
He beams proudly at me, stretching his arms out and spinning around.
All of this just to prevent the worst of the worst from getting out. Crushing the hopes and dreams under mine steel-toe capped heel.
He turns back to us and Buck scoffs.
Always the eccentric types in positions of power, huh?
He murmurs, jabbing me playfully.
Come on, indulge him. This is his kingdom after all.
With that, Buck strides forward, ignoring the rain and ocean froth drenching him in moments. He gives the warden a firm handshake before gesturing to me.
Ah, you must be our revered Sin Eater. I've never seen what your people do up close and personal. But I will take great pride in seeing it enacted on our inmates, if it means they will suffer just a little bit more.
My eyebrow raised involuntarily, the warden noticing me and immediately holding his hands up defensively.
Oh no, don't mistake me for a sadist. I just wish to assure my job is done properly. These are bad creatures. I deign to even call them people for what they've done. Each one has committed a crime. A sin, if you will, so egregious that God himself would sooner spit on his own son than allow a single one amongst them into the kingdom of Elysium.
"You're a religious man, Mr. Leichenberg?" I asked, Buck and I following him to the central tube that connected the entrance to the main prison, Nestor and Edgar bringing up the rear as the pilot cackled and began taking off again.
Are you not, Madam Lockwood? In a world of such horrors as what we house here, one must have something to cling to that enables us to believe there is truth, justice, punishment, and reward. A balance for all things. Such was the way the Greeks believed things to be. With your profession, I would have assumed due to be ein woman of the cloth, no?
I shook my head as we piled into the chamber, the doors closing on our last look of the outside world for a week. If there is a God, he blinded himself to our struggles long ago. Whatever goes on here is up to us now. I just do my part in the process. Buck sighed, and Nestor fed Edgar to keep him calm as we descended, the front section of the tube showing nothing but steel as we descended. But after a moment, the view gave way to the top of a sprawling prison, the general population area. Thousands of inmates, some human and others, well, monsters of the most literal sense, all in turquoise jumpsuits and either congregating in groups, doing work for the officers or working out. As we got closer, it became apparent this was a building far bigger and deeper than I could have imagined.
Our prison houses 7,000 inmates of various backgrounds, crimes, and origins. We are tasked with making sure they never get out and cause more havoc up above. I'd inform you more of them, or even give you einen tour, but alas, we're not here for them.
The tube dropped down and we were plunged into darkness once more, save for a few maintenance lights that flooded the room in a red and purple hue.
Your prison is expansive, Warden. I'm impressed. How many legendary beasts you got locked up in here? I'd enjoy cataloging some of them for my compendium.
The warden seemed to think on it for a moment before politely shaking his head.
Ah, my apologies, but there's no chance on your schedule. Each section will be difficult and take you a day to complete. With 7 of them, I do not wish to waste extra energy. But I am proud of the structure wherein these individuals are housed. Since my appointment to the position, we have had a far more complacent criminal populace and far less deaths.
He clapped his hands together excitedly as we came to a stop in front of a single white hallway.
You know, I never envisioned getting my dream job by 34. But here we are. Strange how the world works. No?
He ushered us out and towards a makeshift office, fitted with a bed, couch, vending machine, and research area.
This is your workstation. We will provide you with anything you may need, and any extra facilities can be provided to you with an escort. Your first inmate is already waiting.
Placing my wet clothes and baggage down, I stared at him incredulously. Now? What about any information on him or her first? A smile rippled across his face, his shoulders hunching. The man wasn't necessarily threatening, but his height, coupled with the power he held here, certainly made it an uncomfortable look.
I want to see if your skills are as true as they come. His as well.
He looked over at Buck, who grinned back, but there was offense right behind it.
What about me? I need a test?
Nestor quipped, Edgar trying to get at his eyebrows and preen them.
No, you're a bodyguard. So long as you protect them, I think we have no issue. Even if I'm not fond of your pet.
Edgar cocked his head in the warden's direction before screeching,
Tasty eyes, tasty eyes!
and laughing as Nestor scolded him. As good a time as any, I suppose. Let's go. Lead the way, Warden. With that, he escorted us out and down the long hallway, through the one locked door and out into a visitor center of sorts. Several guards stood on watch and patted us down for contraband before we could even step foot into their interview areas.
Welcome, Warden. Who are our esteemed guests visiting today? Cell 2, Officer Mitchell. Prisoner number 4822.
He passed us a pen to sign in with and nodded before buzzing the gate and allowing us through.
Remember, if they catch you, we won't negotiate. Not for anything or anyone.
Nestor smiled as we went through to the interview room on the left of the cells. If I fail them, they're dead anyway. The interview chamber was odd, to say the least. It seemed cordoned off from the rest of the building, as if quarantined. A small table with 4 chairs greeted us, a thick plexiglass window stretching across the length of the far wall, total darkness on the other side.
The prisoner will be with you momentarily. I'll be watching from my office, but there is a button to the right of the wall if anything should go wrong. I'll speak with you after you're done. Good luck, Fra Lockwood.
He paused as the door held open, as if contemplating whether or not to say something else.
Don't be fooled by this one. Looks can be deceiving.
With that, the door shut and our first interview began. For a moment, there was a silence that permeated the room, as if waiting for someone to start things off. Buck was sat down with his compendium open and ready, a small microphone attached to a dictator machine, Nestor leaning against the wall and keeping Edgar entertained. I called out, hoping to get a response. The warden called you prisoner 4822, but I'm hoping you have a more fitting name. Never been a fan of complexities. I'm Madame Nell Lockwood, the person you all asked to come here for your, sins? Are you there? Something shifted in the darkness, a thick, bulging, undulating shape that began wheezing and hacking as if it moved forward.
Yeah, I'm here, ma'am. Name's Tayula Makepeace. Thank you for coming.
I felt something, still not sure what, but I pressed on and tried to find a natural groove. The session wouldn't work if we didn't get off on a good footing. Why'd you ask for me? I'm to understand none of you are particularly sorry for what you did. I may as well get the awkwardness out now. Seems silly to ignore. To her credit, she scoffed at my comment.
Just because I ain't sorry, don't mean the sin shouldn't be excised. Maybe it'll make me feel remorse. Who knows? I know what I did was wrong, but it was for a greater purpose. You'll see.
You know what I do, how I do it? I asked, the figure hacking and chuckling before replying. Yeah, I know what you do, honey. I got a lot of sins, but it's the early ones, the ones that puts me in this metal coffin that I need to get off my chest. And boy, if my chest ain't heavy enough already. She laughed, and I began to get the impression she was a heavier woman, even with the shroud of darkness. But instead of pressing her to move forward, I did what I'd always done. I encouraged her to tell her story.
It all started when I was about 11 or 12. I was a pretty young thing, let me tell ya. Wore nice floral dresses, had fair skin. All the boys wanted to take me out. Heck, even the girls. Not that I minded. Mama said I was her perfect angel. Problem was, I didn't care for any of them. Not really, anyway. They were just there. Background noise to absorb when I needed attention, gifts, or favors. I tell ya, If the world hadn't dropped another atom bomb, and I was the only one left standing, I'm not sure I'd have been too concerned with the aftermath.
She snorted and spat on the floor, clearing her throat before continuing.
One night, right before Valentine's Day, something appeared at the end of my bed. He was tall, muscular, completely covered in red hair and washboard abs. I mean, my goodness.
She let out a shudder, and I felt my skin crawl.
He said his name was Azazel, and that he was an incubus, someone sent here to pass on a message. I wasn't attaining my true form, but the form that others wanted me to partake. Until I became what he knew I could be, both inside and out. Well, I was destined to be alone and unloved.
So what did you do next, Tayula? Were you inspired to change, or did you seek a doctor? I asked, hands tapping the table as I gained a better idea of the woman in front of me.
A doctor? Bitch, you crazy? I got a vision from my ideal man, and he told me I had to change. You don't just ignore that. So, I did as I was told. Began eating more, not worrying about my hygiene unless my parents forced me to. But they gave up eventually. Stopped studying, dedicated myself wholeheartedly to the craft of perfection. Gained 150 pounds in just a few years, and my God, I was beautiful. I still am, of course, but when you see for yourself for the first time, it's like peeling off your old skin and stepping out of a cocoon.
She leaned back, and I heard the chair groan under the pressure. By now, a thick mist was forming around her, a byproduct of the session, but she wasn't to know just yet.
Was it around this time you started luring young men and women into the woods, Tayula?
Buck asked, his eyes dark and his grin replaced with a scowl.
You must have been around 17 years old when you started, right? I know the name, and what you did.
Tayula shifted in her seat and made an approving noise, leaning in the darkness to see Buck better.
My. As if it weren't enough to have one looker in here. I got two. Are y'all helping me with a scene to be eaten, or are y'all the snacks? You look good enough to eat.
She giggled and continued.
When I completed the physical metamorphosis, Azazel came back to me, cooing in my ear that to have the perfect love, I had to be willing to give up everything and go forward, to take love from others.
She scratched at her face, thick calluses resisting the nails, and I swear I heard a pimple pop. My stomach turning, but ignoring the desire to lose composure.
First few, I just told him there was an animal in need, or that I lost my baby brother in them woods. I guess the damsel in distress thing is still pretty popular. They'd always come in, help me, and get caught. That's where the real process began. See, it wasn't enough to just kill them. The point of true love was to carry them with you forever, to take their lives, take a piece of them, and ensure it was always a part of you. That was true power.
She leaned forward, and it took every inch of my body not to recoil in horror. She was a gargantuan woman in her 30s, 600 pounds, easily, undulating fat and heavy folds spilling out of her turquoise jumpsuit and spilling over the chair. Her black hair was matted to her head, and her facial features were so sunken into her elongated and fattened skull that I struggled to comprehend how she saw anything. But that mouth, my god, it was double the size of my own. The teeth were yellowed and the gums bright red. Random hairs and pimples littered her face like badges of honor.
See? They say bees make the best honey, but that ain't quite true. Azazel taught me all about the mummification of old human beings. Men and women who willingly gave their bodies to be something more. But there are far quicker ways to make it happen. If you have a guiding voice.
She grinned, and a long black tongue escaped her lips, like a serpent tasting the air around a frightened victim.
I'd make sure the holes were deep. The coffins were done perfectly to their measurements. It helped to have a friendly neighbor who made him special for me if I gave him favors in return. Once they fell in, the drop was steep enough that they couldn't get back out. The liquid would act like a gelling agent, stopping them from going very far until I came back with the rest of the ingredients. Watching them struggle like flies in a trap was always so immensely satisfying.
She groaned, and the hairs on my body stood on end. It felt more and more like I was being sized up. The red and pink mist filling her room now, gaining mass at a rapid rate. So, you made these people into food? I asked, trying not to dry heave as I finished my sentence.
They'd struggle until their strength gave out and their heads fell under the water. Then, I'd put the lid on and wait. My own little Garden of Eden. It was like I was a god in my own backyard. Give it just 2 months, and they'd be nothing more than a sweet liquid that kept me young, beautiful, and immortal. So long as I had that sweet nectar, I wasn't going nowhere. I had a task to fulfill and a part to play. So saith Azazel. I couldn't stop until I met the one I was destined to fall in love with.
But that's not all you did, is it? Because if it was, we'd be done by now. I pressed on, the mist beginning to form into a shape, but not quite there yet. Tayula shifted uncomfortably in her seat, finally showing a degree of emotion before she continued.
I started to lose track of how many I was putting into them pits. Didn't matter if it were a couple, an older guy, a younger girl, whatever. But, importantly, I knew to be smart and to be careful. Never any personal ties. So when Candace wandered in,
She paused, beady little eyes welling up with tears, and her jowls quivering with sadness.
I broke my only rule. My little girl was only 3 when she went out to play. She wandered into an open pit that I dug for our next victim. He was a playmate of hers, and if she just waited a little bit longer.
She burst into tears, greasy, filthy hands covering her face as she sobbed heavily. And after that, you gave yourself up. It seemed too convenient, but she nodded, snot running down her face.
I saw no way forward with mine or Azazel's goal without Candace, my progeny. So I gave myself up, and here I am, waiting for death.
The haze was nearly fully formed now, but something was still missing.
That's not the worst of it, is it, Tayula?
Buck pressed, something in his voice commanding the room.
You lure in people with pity and sexual favors. We're expected to believe you had any soft spot? I don't buy it. I know what the greatest sacrifices entail. Candace didn't wander in there, did she?
The crying grew louder as Buck pressed her more. It took a moment, but her demeanor shifted once again, and I swear I have never felt more like a diver in a shark tank, waiting to be devoured. Every fiber of my being urged me to run as the crying gave way to uproarious laughter and a thunderous pounding against the plexiglass, damn near jumping me out of my skin as she cackled.
Oh, I thought my acting would have fooled you. Guess I'm losing my charm, huh?
I felt sick, my nostrils filling with the scent of honey. I knew we were close.
No, I didn't give myself up out of grief. I did it because Candace was the last one. My little angel with her pink bow, flowing locks and curly hair. She saw me as a god, but I saw her as a means to an end. A love unrequited from daughter to mother. She didn't even put up a fight when I dropped her into the pit. Just looked up at me with those dull eyes and said, "Mama, why?" As I poured the mixture in. And let me tell ya.
Tayula leaned forward, her fetid breath fogging up the glass as the mist around her took the shape of a tall man, clad in red fur and with thick horns. Yellow eyes beaming at her with an expecting grin.
She was the most delicious of them all, and they're with me always. All of them.
Tayula, why even have me here if you've got no real fears of what happens next? Why put us through that sordid and disgusting tale? I tried to keep my emotions in check, struggling to hold my nerve.
Because I wanted someone to look at my beauty one last time and see me unburdened by sin as I move to the next phase. This is just the first part. You are my witness. That's all there is to it.
She got out of her seat as I held back my sheer disgust, knowing in a few moments I need to devour the sin. She cracked her large back and neck, smiling at us as if we were those same victims she lured into the woods, moments away from their death.
Been nice meeting ya. Glad you were there to hear my scene. But time's a wasting. Azazel and I are off to greener pastures of godhood. But I'm sure we'll see one another again. Someday.
With that, she walked over to the man, embracing him in a passionate kiss as he pinched her nose with one hand, gripping her throat with the other. She struggled, and despite her sheer weight and height advantage, could not break his grip. I watched in horror as her fighting grew weaker and as her arms fell limp. He pulled away to crack her neck and let her fall to the floor. His eyes scanned us once before Buck caught his name and he faded from the room in a puff of smoke. Nestor ran for the panic button and pushed it as the sirens rang out, and furtive footsteps rushed down the hall, but I was already fixated on the final part of the ritual. Some sin eaters only needed to devour the sin in a meal form, carrying it with them and moving on. But in my case, there had to be a story, a reason, and a connection. Now, I'm staring down the end of this creature's exploits, knowing it will be a part of me forevermore. In front of me lay a small bowl filled with a golden liquid that bubbled and frothed. I knew I had to eat it to finish the ritual, but there was something stopping me. Something I could see in the broth that made me realize I would regret visiting this prison for the rest of my life. A lock of hair tied to a small pink bow, floating to the surface before fizzling away. Eyes closed and hands trembling, I brought the bowl to my lips and did as I was instructed to. I devoured the sin.
Inmate number 4822. Tayula Makepeace. Sin. Lust. Food. Mellified man. Next sin. Greed.